listeners.
Hi.
Thanks for coming back to Not So Giant Women with your hosts, Daria and Ivy. And today we're going to tackle Rose's Scabbard. So I think it's safe to say Rose's name in the title. It's pretty exciting at this point, yeah?
Yep. And well, we've seen Rose's sword, so
All right.
let's assume we're getting kind of... I mean, so far, her scabbard has been Lion's head, so...
Yes. You are correct. So we're just, I guess, hoping to find some backstory on that sword. Is that what we're going for today?
Here we go.
Find out.
Are the crystal gems will always save the day.
Oh!
Wow.
More deep emotion this week.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Okay. How did we get there?
Yeah.
Oh, we got there because we started off back in Strawberry Field with the giant strawberries.
Sure did.
Taking a look at all the old gem weapons which have been sitting there for 5,000 years. And it's our heroes, and Lion has come along this time. Stephen is trying to persuade Pearl that he's trained Lion better, but Lion is entirely ignoring him. Garnet has found herself a nice, huge axe, which I'm sure she'll find use for. But Lion has gone scrabbling amongst the strawberries and dug up a pink scabbard, which Pearl recognises, and most of us viewers who have been paying attention also recognise as the scabbard for Rose's sword, which we've been seeing on and off for a while. Briefly explains what a scabbard is: a sheath for a sword. Taking it back home, Pearl wants to find the sword that goes with it and leads Stephen through the warp pad to Rose's armory, they call it. I've been calling it the dojo. Turns out it's actually the armory. And she's distinctly unimpressed that Lion has brought Stephen here before, because Pearl is very much right at the key. I am Rose's totally favourite, and I am totally the one who loves Rose. She loves me better than all of you, and I miss Rose so much, and everything is about me and Rose and love and everything. And so she is not thrilled that Stephen has already visited what she thought was she and Rose's special secret place, being the armory. Gets a bit irate when Stephen is just showing off the bits of the armory with silly names, and she's trying to recognise her grandiose titles. When she frustrated exclaimed, looking for a sword, and she describes the sword and shows a pearlogram of the sword we've been seeing all this time, Stephen's like, oh, I've seen that, takes him back home and brings the sword out of Lion's main dimension where it's been kept before, so other things. Also doesn't thrill Pearl because she didn't know Rose had a lion, and why is Rose going around not telling her things? Because she's Pearl and she's the favourite and she loves her and she's the special one. And Garnet and Amethyst draw the conclusion that, oh yes, Lion is pink. It makes perfect sense that he is Rose's lion. Kind of obvious when you think about it. Stephen tries showing off all the cool things she can do with Lion's main dimension, but Pearl hits a fit of pique at the idea of Rose keeping secrets from her, almost destroys Rose's portrait when she slams her fist into the side of the house, and stomps off into the warp pad. Stephen asks Lion to show him where she's gone, and this time Lion does so. Back with the Lion goes where he needs to go, not necessarily where he wants to go. And she's back in Strawberry Fields having a big cry of the scabbard and the sword, and she doesn't want to speak to Stephen, especially doesn't want to speak to Lion, and keeps running away from them. She tries to jump up a bunch of floating little island rock things. Stephen agrees to leave Lion behind and almost gets to the top of the floating little islands with Pearl, except he can't jump through the last one. Simpsons viewers are probably reminded of the time Homer didn't make the gorge jump. But Stephen managed to grab some vines and climb back up and sees the incredibly sad Pearl, who remembers via a story and a pearlogram of when Rose decided to stay on Earth, defend it, and tell Pearl that she didn't have to, and told her of the risks, i.e. death or banishment. And Pearl said that, of course, she had to stay if she was going to be with Rose. Stephen manages to hug it out with a distraught Pearl. Pearl gives the sword and scabbard back, but does retrieve for Pearl from the main dimension Rose's flag, which we see Pearl giving bunch. It looks like she's telling the stories of the glory days of herself and Rose and the others and what they did with the flag. And eventually, all tuckered out, they ride Lion back home. And we're done.
That was a whammy.
Yeah. And so hot on the heels of Amethyst's feelings for Rose.
Yes.
So we're definitely getting What Rose Meant to Me episodes.
Yeah, it was very interesting because even though both of them felt very strongly about her, this very different vibe with the whole thing. Like Pearl was possessive and thought that they had some kind of special relationship that the others did not have with Rose.
Which they may well have done, but it just, she wasn't getting literally everything.
Right. She was definitely set off at the idea that there was ever anything that she wouldn't have shared with her. She considers this to be pretty major, that there was this lion that she was putting her stuff inside of, a pink lion that she never saw or knew about. So,
and Garnet simply accepted on face value that Rose had some secrets that she didn't tell everyone because that's how secrets work. Whereas Pearl could not cope. And Amethyst got a bit angry, but she seemed to be mostly angry at Pearl getting angry this time.
Yes.
At her possessiveness, you're not the only one who misses her. Possibly echoes of masculine capacity. Possibly this is also a thing they visited a few times with their comparative relationships with Rose.
Yeah, definitely.
And really, if anything's going to shift my speculation that Pearl's in love with Rose from speculation to canon, this would be it.
Oh, absolutely. What's really funny is, I mean, it's not super clear whether they had a quote unquote relationship, but it is 100% clear from this episode that Pearl was deeply in love with Rose.
Yeah.
And everything that she said about her was coded romantic. She's thinking about how beautiful she was, that they were devoted to each other, that, just everything about it seemed, at least, that she was in love with Rose, even if it wasn't obvious if it was mutual.
Yeah, some of the details may be different for Immortal Gems, but Pearl, you definitely got heart eyes for Stephen's mum there.
Yeah, I was very confused that there were people still denying it after this episode. I mean, we've discussed a couple times that we've seen signs that she had those feelings for Rose, but this was basically what I consider to be the episode that made it undeniable, and lots of people were still denying it. Oh, the heteronormative.
Yeah, I mean, previous occasions you could just about squint and say, okay, it's just severe admiration channeled through grief and Pearl being Pearl, but no, this, like you said, we don't know if it's mutual, and we may never know because Rose has left the scene, but definitely Pearl's all in for this. And she sounded almost desperate. Well, not almost. She sounded actually desperate, asking if Stephen had any memories left from Rose, or if she was able to see through Stephen's eyes what was left of her echo, spirit, ghost, whatever. And we don't get an answer to that. I mean, chances are in story, Stephen doesn't actually know. We haven't really seen any indication that, apart from the sort of the actual gem part, that any of Rose's Roseness as a consciousness, soul, being, whatever lives on in Stephen. A few traits, certainly, but...
Right, but that's typical for someone's literal son. Right. Yeah, he kind of made a little face when she said that. Do you have any of her memories? He's just kind of like, what the hell? We haven't been given any indication that he would.
Well, every time he finds out something about his mom, it's totally news to him. And he doesn't sort of have some dawning of, oh, I kind of remember this place, like from when I was my mother. So...
Right. He seems to have a connection with some of the places and things that she did and used, but that's what you'd expect from someone who, like, genetically has a part of her as part of his being. So there's that's still really not clear. But I liked that Pearl asked that question because it makes me think, I wonder how long she's been wondering that herself, that she clearly has no idea really kind of what Stephen is or whether Rose really is truly gone.
And she's probably wondering for the past however many years if he's going to sort of mature into Rose somehow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we haven't heard anything like that from the other two, or even Greg come to that. So chances are they have grasped that Rose is not Stephen despite the connection, and probably Pearl has too, but she's just that desperate for there to be some more.
Yeah, it's a lot of actually, this one, tone-wise, the way that Pearl acted reminded me a little bit of how she acted in Space Race, because those are 2 episodes where she kind of lost it. Like, you get this idea Pearl fundamentally is not okay. And sometimes it usually seems to have something to do with her past or with Rose, that she has a mental break and she flips out.
Yeah, which is in her comfort zone. She's fine. But when she leaves her comfort zone, it's not a staggered progression. She just completely loses her business. Yeah,
she has unresolved issues with whatever connections she had in her past, that she hasn't dealt with it. And I don't know, like, everybody on this show needs therapy, but at this point it seems like Pearl would benefit from it the most. She definitely has some indications of pretty realistic mental illness sometimes, because there are a lot of, real people in the world who are mentally ill, who mostly hold it together, but still have, traits like Pearl does, with like the classic B kind of behaviors. And the breaks that Pearl had, she yelled at Steven. She said, "What would you know? You never even met her." And, saying things that's pretty cruel to say to a child who he can't help that he never met his mother. But parents will sometimes do that. They'll say regrettable, cruel things in front of or to their children. And we don't really see stuff like that on media unless the parent is a villain, just even though most of us have had something hurtful said to us by one of our parents. So
yeah, it's very on or off with your good or bad in most cartoons.
Right, yeah.
And usually it's that you see a bad person has good traits rather than a good person having less desirable traits.
Yeah.
Or if they do, they're resolved by the end of the episode. And I think Pearl's got a lot more work to do on that than we've saw so far.
She has so many layers. Like, the more you learn about her, the more she seems very interesting and complicated and very problematic in some ways. But, I guess real people are. I think it's interesting that, she, like you said, she just kind of lost it right there on the floor, that she's yelling and screaming and punching the wall in front of the kid. She's not holding it together.
And she's made kind of a perfect version of Rose in her head, I'd say, which can no longer be offset against the real one. I mean, doubtless in the previous 4,990 years, there were moments when Rose was less than exemplary, but Pearl could just balance out against all the good she could see in her and process it. Whereas now she's basically had 10, keep going to 10, however old Stephen is, years of just only thinking good and perfect things about Rose. And I think usually they peak at that danger in this show, because most of the memories of Rose are about how brilliant she was. But
yeah, she's sainted at this point.
Yeah, but we know, because, well, we're people, that almost no one is like that. We've seen the Gems are no exception. So they're remembering the best of her, but chances are there were times when she screwed up or had annoying habits, or, ate the last of Amethyst cheeseburgers before she could get to them, or whatever.
Pearl wouldn't mind. She's like, "You can have all of my cheeseburgers, Rose." I don't even like to eat. So no, you're right. Yeah, definitely at this point we've heard from Rose once in the VCR tape, and everything else is filtered through fond memories and grief and distance of someone that everyone clearly admired and loved. But I mean, especially after someone has passed away, it seems like you almost can't even remember the bad parts as easily, because when you miss someone, it's all the parts that you miss that keep coming up. And Steven doesn't have a way to get to the truth. He only knows her through other people.
Yeah, every time we've seen her, it's been at a step removed through shapeshift to Pearlogram, or even the video cassette. We've not had like a flat out flashback to Rose times where she's been standing right there.
That's right. Yeah. And since the show is from Steven's point of view, it's difficult to do things like flashbacks. They would have to have some kind of angle, like the videotape kind of was a glimpse into the past. But they have to be careful with that if they want to make sure that it stays in Steven's point of view.
Yeah, well, even the videotape, Rose would have been consciously presenting herself well if she's leaving a message for her future child that she knows, or at least is pretty sure she won't be around to see.
Yeah. And it seems like, if she didn't like how it came out, she could just reshoot it. It's not necessarily just raw and real. Yep. I really liked during when Pearl had her outburst and she hit the wall and the painting fell down. I like that Garnet just kind of slid forward and caught it. It was very symbolic, Yeah,
and also very Garnet to just step in, do what needs to be done, and not make a fuss.
Yeah, there's so many sort of layers just to that one action. I mean, one, you assume that she saw it coming and she could get there. And then number two, she's kind of left holding the mantle because you get the idea they were following Rose until they didn't have her anymore. And now she's kind of following. She's got these people following her now. She's the de facto leader. But, she's never stood there and said like, well, I'm the leader. I give the orders. That's just how it happened. But to me, that felt really important, that moment. And then there's just this silence while she's standing there holding this portrait. Of course, I pay a lot of attention to stuff that happens with Garnet because I want to make everything about Garnet because I like Garnet. so I'm just like, ooh, Garnet moment.
Well, I, for a moment, and I imagine I'm not the only one, thought that that was going to end up with the portrait landing on Pearl and her head stuck through it.
Oh, goodness. Oh, that would have been so
because that's what happens to portraits in cartoons usually, but no, that good thing too, because that would have completely killed the mood one way or the other.
Yeah.
Also, from a Doylist point of view, if Garnet's staying back and putting the portrait back up, she can't go in and horn in on Stephen and Pearl's moment later on.
Right.
She probably knows that with her future vision. That's why she's doing all that, just adjusting and readjusting. She's giving herself an excuse not to go.
Yeah. She and Amethyst both kind of acted like, Amethyst, I guess, more than Garnet, but both of them did not seem particularly surprised that Pearl was having an outburst like this. Like, they're probably used to her having meltdowns over Rose.
Well, Amethyst even says, I hate it when she gets like this.
Yes.
Implying that this is
where she's going,
happened more than a couple of times.
Right. And that Amethyst does not feel sympathy for her. She's just like, God, Pearl is doing this again. And it's not like her pain is worse than my pain. She's just, what a drama queen. She's doing it again.
Yeah, I'm just going to stomp out and ride it out.
Yeah. Whereas I guess Garnet just, her way of dealing with most things is just to be silent and stoic about it. And realistic, I guess, very, very straightforward with her commentary. Just, Rose kept many things secret even from us. But that was not the right thing to say there. Pearl's version of reality is that she was the special one and everyone else was not as close.
And I think that's also Garnet's pragmatic side. I think even if Garnet somehow thought that Garnet was the special one, she would still go, some people keep secrets even from those closest to them. I guess that's because they're secrets. Moving on. Whereas Pearl was all in body and soul, body and gem. Or was it gem and soul? Not sure how to work those. But yeah, Pearl needed everything to be about her and Rose, which is kind of autocentric and possessive.
Yeah, and she was even kind of saying some actual in denial kind of statements like, no, if Rose had a lion, I would have known about it. And, it's clearly her stuff in there, like Stephen said.
Plainly she did, and you don't.
Yeah. And Amethyst, that's why he's pink. And Garnet, it's a little obvious.
And also, just for any very slow viewers who hadn't quite caught on to the lion is somehow pink because Rose connection.
Right.
He's not quite a naturally occurring pink lion from...
Right. I mean, I guess in the Steven Universe, you don't necessarily know that lions aren't pink, but I mean, well, I guess they make that pretty clear that a pink lion would be strange. But the fact that we have now seen inside of his mane, and there's a bunch of stuff in there that's clearly related to Rose, and he found the videotape and stuff, the others didn't know that he was doing that. They didn't know that he could go inside lion at all. So now they know.
Yeah, Pearl tried to reach in and didn't. I don't know if that's because she's not Stephen, because she's Pearl, or if it's just you have to know you have to be admitted, or it could be she just didn't poke in the right spot of the mane.
Yeah, so far we've only seen Stephen go through the main, and Lion did make a little growly noise when she tried.
Yeah, well, Lion's justified in not being fond of Pearl about now.
Yeah, she was not nice to Lion in this episode, just saying things like, shoo, you need to train that thing better. Now he looks at me when I say his name, Lion, hey Lion.
If ever you had any doubts that the people making the show were basing these things on cats, like actual house cats.
Absolutely.
Because that's what my cat does whenever someone comes around. I say, oh, look, she's learnt words. And I say her name, or I say one of her cue words, and she just sits there licking her arm.
You are so irrelevant to me right now. Yeah, he was doing his business. He was digging around for that scabbard, which ended up interesting Pearl, so get clowned.
Yeah, so far my off-the-cuff guess about how Lion works has been pretty spot on. Might have actually nailed one there with his, he doesn't do what you want, he does what you need.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Or occasionally just what he wants.
Yeah. Huh?
Or occasionally just what he wants.
Sure, yeah, I mean, probably no one needed him to eat half of a lizard. But, Lion's got a lion. So it's interesting that at the beginning in that scene, they were at this strawberry battlefield talking about gathering up these weapons, even though they've been sitting there for like 5,000 years. So I was wondering if this is described as something Garnet wants to do. Maybe she is thinking, like, with all the homeworld stuff that's been happening, and the previous episode was Marble Madness. So it's like, Peridot is telling on them to somebody. It could mean trouble. So I wonder if she was just like, we probably better clean up these weapons so that they don't fall into the wrong hands, or maybe so we can use them.
Yeah, that enormous axe is probably going to come in handy. Different reactions from the gems to the battlefield itself, whereas Pearl has a surprising bloodthirsty streak with this, and there was a glorious battle here, and we won.
Oh yeah,
Klingon there, and whereas Garnet, even in her deadpan Garnet way, is appalled because this is where thousands of people died.
I really think that dynamic is interesting because they're both legit veterans of this war, and they have like diametrically opposed reactions to it. I mean, Amethyst is saying like she wishes she could have seen it, and Garnet says, no, you don't, because there was death. And Pearl is just like, no, but we won. Like, both of those things are like legitimately common reactions to being a survivor of battle. And it's really interesting that it's those two feeling that way, because when you see battles, you usually see Garnet at least willing to charge in first and beat up stuff. She's not worried about it. You don't necessarily get this eagerness from her, but she's not shy about doing it. Whereas Pearl is definitely the more strategic one, the more careful one. So it is really interesting to hear their perspectives on this battle, where Garnet was just like, yeah, it was terrible. And Pearl was just like, we won and it was glorious. Very interesting.
And Amethyst is a bit disconnected because she wasn't there, and in some ways she only says a couple of things, but it's a bit like when you take a kid to a museum before they've really got a grasp on how history works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So no doubt she's heard of it before, but to her it's something that happened off distant before she was born. I mean, I've literally seen kids at war memorials, and
sure.
they don't. Also, because to some kids everything in the past is one blanket era of the past.
Yeah.
So they don't process that the difference between a war their parents or grandparents were talking about fighting in, like the Gulf or Vietnam or whatever, or the Trojan War or something, because it's just all the olden days.
The olden days with the same kind of weaponry, and didn't they all just fight with bows and arrows?
Well, this lot have spaceships and they were fighting with swords and axes, so...
Yep. It's really interesting that so far we haven't seen any guns, though. We've seen a cannon.
Yeah, I was going to say, the closest we've seen is the cannon, or maybe the bows and arrows, if you want to think in projectile terms. But, yeah, certainly you'd think that unless they're very blinkered, that gem technology would be able to make projectile weapons or something, but either they don't or our gems have just sworn them off because they're better with swords and things.
Mm-hmm. Seems like somebody at least would pop up with a ray gun.
Yeah,
Come on, space aliens.
I suppose the big eye in the sky was kind of doing a bit of beaming stuff, but it wasn't like a hand weapon.
I'm thinking about in the episode Watermelon Steven, Pearl started being able to shoot lasers out of her spear.
That's right.
And Garnet had the rocket fists. So they've both done that rarely for some reason, but then Amethyst's new one in that episode was just doing it like a sonic spin. She didn't have a projectile, but she already has a distance weapon. So interesting. Yeah, you have to wonder, like, I think we've talked about this before, but we've got all these giant weapons sitting around. Like, what were they doing there if they can manifest weapons? So some of them might have been made for really big gems or fusions. So
yeah, and there's nothing that says, well, in fact, this episode pretty much underscores it, that there's no reason you're restricted to using the weapon that comes out of your own gem.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe it's because to get a proper fatal hit on a gem, you have to go for real blunt force trauma against their actual gems, that distance weapons just aren't as effective.
Maybe. They can see them coming and get out of the way. I don't know. I do not know. It's kind of scary to think about, like, during their conversation at the end where Pearl is doing her projection of the holographic Rose and reiterating their conversation, like she's doing Rose's voice, but when they're having this conversation, that the way Rose presented it was, if we lose, we'll be killed, and if we win, we can never go home. So I guess being killed, as she said, would have been being broken, being shattered. So you really feel the stakes at this point. And she had no question about it. She's just like, of course I'm going to stay with you. I mean, why would I want to go home if you were here?
Yeah, I did briefly wonder if that moment was also filtered a bit through Pearl's perspective. I mean, it is literally Pearl projecting the events.
Yes.
If she remembers Rose standing tall, bold and perfect, not sitting on a rock, spluttering on her words, going, what's the word for, when we're living? Tip my tongue.
Yeah, so maybe we'll stay and die. Yeah, it was definitely very composed, very, very serious moment there. That's another aspect of it, that like when she first makes the life-size Rose and she drops to one knee like she's kneeling to her. And that's part of the reason that some people were interpreting that love that she had for her as like, no, she just respects her as a leader or so, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, yeah, you don't hold hands with your
I think she does that too. I just don't think that's the whole of it.
Right. I think especially just because there's this perception that you can't do certain things with same-sex relationships on kids' TV. There's that, and also homophobia that causes people to just kind of assume that they're not seeing what it could be. And, let's just assume that what we're seeing here is somebody who serves a higher ranked gem kneeling to her and pledging her devotion and stuff. And I'm like, you just don't see a whole lot of blushing and calling them beautiful and making these clearly just personal feelings of love that she's describing and personal loss.
Yeah, and I think given this is a kid's show, we're not going to have her turning to Steven and say, I totes wanted to mac on your mom. So I think this is as big a declaration as you're going to get in a cartoon like this. And in some ways, regardless of any of the genders of the participants.
Yes, exactly. It's very interesting that the first kind of intense romantic interaction, which was a full-on mouth-on-mouth kiss, was Sadie and Lars. And probably once they've done that, if they're going to get censorship notes later from anything that's implying too much that this is a same-sex relationship, that they're going to try to make it seem like, oh, well, we just don't want it to have that advanced of romance. Well, you let through this kiss. So if it's not about homophobia at this point, then why did you let the straight people kiss?
Well, for a while, it was also definitely a thing that you eschewed any kind of romance in kids' shows because just assumed kids didn't want to see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But
I just don't think that's part of this show. I think they are going there.
yeah, I think that, and I just want to say, like, I don't feel like they were doing things strategically to hide things or anything. I don't think it's quite like that. But that was my thought process. Like, oh, if anybody would say that the reason they're not allowing a same-sex kiss would be because they don't want any kissing, it's like, well, you've already had this kiss, so you can't use that excuse. But anyway, I think you're right, because mostly I just see a very complex depth of feeling and also a little bit of sensuality, but you don't see stuff that you would see in adult animation or television in terms of like the physical interaction of the characters for the most part. So, some kind of strange phrasing from Pearl that one time when she's saying, the scabbard held your mother's sword. Nothing else could fit so perfectly inside.
Yeah.
And she's standing there going like this with her fingers.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
I noticed
what are you
that.
talking about, Pearl?
I'm also a bit, well, if they're letting that through, they're...
Yeah. Just this close-up of her hands while she's putting her fingers interlaced like that. Like she's thinking about things inside of other things.
And just how she seems to step out for a minute in her head when she says nothing could fit so perfectly inside.
That's very strange phrasing.
Well, do we need to go PG for a moment and tell the people what the word origins of Scabbard are based on?
Well, you know what? They had trouble with the translation, I heard, for other countries. So they were like, well, basically, if we name this in Mexico, we're going to be calling it Rose's vagina. So they were like, let's find something else to call it.
And I can imagine Rebecca Sugar going, really? Would it? Well, I never.
What if they just straight up did that? Yes, this episode is called Maximum Capacity. This episode is called Marble Madness. This episode is called Rose. What? The next episode is Open Book. What?
The word, even in English, the word I hear more commonly, and this could just also just be a quote of experience, more commonly for the thing that holds a sword is a sheath. And a sheath is also used as a euphemism for vagina. I wonder if that might have been on the card before someone said, no, we get that one. We know what you're doing there.
Yeah. Yeah. An early title for this episode, though we're not into the factoid section yet, but an early title for this episode was actually Rose's Secrets.
Oh.
So they intentionally brought it back to the scabbard. Interesting.
I also confess, I just kind of like scabbard as a nice old-timey word.
Yeah. I mean, we've got these gems who are talking about stuff that happened 5,000 years ago. We can use some old-timey language now and then. Yeah. I wonder if Pearl ever makes holograms of Rose just to like hang out with her and pretend she's there.
That's scarily close to Amethyst shapeshift into Rose thing.
Yeah. Although at least Pearl doing that while she's alone to revisit memories would not be quite as creepy.
I guess it depends how much is visiting memory and how much is sort of making Rose do things, both of which are entirely within her power.
Yeah, I think so.
And if she would be like, making up things that she wished that Rose had said.
Right. That would be a little unhealthy, I think. But, she makes those hollow pearls and then she does something like the first time she did it, she used her sword to cut the stream between her and the hologram, and then it would act independently. She wasn't like actively controlling it. So I wonder what kind of situation she might do that with the Roseograms.
I'd hope for her sake she couldn't bring herself to do that. I think that was the line between indulging some sad memories and massive self-deceit. I mean, we've seen on occasion that her holograms are hard light or solid or whichever word for it you seem to use, and which made it a bit more poetic when the hologram dissolved in Pearl's hand this time, because it's not that she physically can't touch it. She obviously can do that, but cut herself short from, snapped herself out of the fantasy, if it were.
Right. I guess because she was still in some way present with Stephen, and such a sad scene sitting there on this floating island, just wallowing like that, and Stephen's with her trying to understand, it's so it's so complicated and so sorrowful and sad. Ugh, I don't know.
With this bit in the middle of, good thing Stephen's got good enough at adventuring to climb up a bunch of vines to a floating rock.
That was really scary, like when he just started to fall. And she was, again, I mean, she wasn't entirely there, or else I'm sure she would have been overprotective like she usually is, but she was just letting him jump after her and let him fall and everything. She saw him clinging to the vines and then just went and sat down and waited for him to climb up. She didn't help him.
Yeah,
that's pretty scary.
At first I thought that was going to snap her back to reality, having to bring him back up somehow, but no, she just peeks over, I guess, does the minimal of, well, he's not actually dead, and just goes back to her reverie.
Right.
And it doesn't so much as turn around the entire time when he's climbing up and coming to her, so she's cut herself off that much that being overprotective of Stephen, as you say, which is usually close to number one on her list, has dropped way, way down it to the point where she's not even looking anymore.
Yeah. Just that face that she was making, just sitting there with her hands pressed against her mouth and her eyes all like squinty and, well, they were very wide, but like the equivalent of bags under her eyes. She's just like, they have such simple faces and somehow they still can get so much emotion, so much complicated, layered feelings onto those faces.
Yeah, I was noticing a lot of that, obviously, especially with Pearl this time, just how she was expressing pretty complex feelings with a pretty straightforward face.
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure if you noticed if it went by too fast, but Rebecca Sugar was on the title card again. So that explains all of the whammies, I guess. But some of the faces that Pearl was making during that time, I don't know for sure which parts of it that Rebecca drew, but it really reminded me like a whole lot of her early comics, specifically Pug Davis. I wasn't sure if I was going to get onto the subject, but I brought a copy of my Pug Davis close to the computer so I could show it to you if this came up. But Pug Davis is
that's
one
cool.
of her early independent comics. And this guy here, I'll have to show a visual of it for the YouTube people. This is the sidekick of Pug Davis, who's named the Blouse. He's super gay, but he reminds me a lot of Pearl in like the way that he's drawn. Like if you can see these pictures of his face here.
Oh, yeah.
He looks so much like Pearl in those scenes where he's upset and his eyes are shining and he's got kind of a pointy nose and the complicated lines on his face. There's some more stuff in here. They got attacked by some terrible aliens in this. Just his face is so like some of those things that you basically just saw. I'm like, I would be very surprised if Rebecca hadn't drawn those. He even gets little stars in his eyes sometimes. Kind of funny. Yeah, here's one with the stars in his eyes.
Obviously, this is one of Becca's things.
One of what?
One of Rebecca's things. Star eyes.
I think so. Oh, I think so. The star eyes. It's evocative. But yeah, this guy, the way that he moves and stuff reminds me a lot of Pearl. Look at his little fingers.
Oh, yeah, those are Pearl fingers.
Yeah. I don't know if she's ever spoken about that. Like if she's said that like the way that he moves or the way that his body is, if that's intentionally something that she brought into her design of Pearl, but it's definitely sort of this nervous gay energy. So
Stephen this week got very polymorphic. At one point his head seemed to be bigger than his whole torso.
Well, we did have Raven and Paul on board as well. I think some of those really exaggerated Pearl faces might have been Paul again, and Raven sometimes goes Ren and Stimpy on things. So when her hair was wilting with her emotions, like a lion, and like she's getting all upset that he knows what everything is.
We saw her shift into a lot of expressions and details she hasn't done before, at least not that I've noticed before.
Mm-hmm. Very extreme, sort of very cartoony. Yeah, boy, but that kind of stuff being like very caricaturized and stuff and then leading to an ending like this is just, it's really this show in a nutshell. It's like, oh, you want to have some funny stuff and then rip your heart out at the end? This is the show.
Yeah, because when Pearl is first losing it, you're kind of a bit laughing along for, oh, Pearl, get your act together.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to be honest, is that I was just like horrified watching it the first time. That I was just like, it was a wrenching feeling. Like, and it really just depends on if you're feeling like Amethyst or if you're sympathizing with Pearl, you're going to react to that scene very different. So it's just like, why is she hollering about being the favorite and being special and only you, Pearl?
And I think also it's coming a bit from Stephen's just nothinging the revelations, like, oh, the sword is over here. Oh, I've been here before.
Right. Yeah, he was expecting her to show him something new, and he's just like, oh, I've been here.
Yeah, and she was expecting him to be wowed by this new and secret private thing, and he's like, yep, it's the armory. Look, here's all my mum's stuff.
Yeah, spiky chain ball. 3-pack of laser light cannons. She's like, the Quackazine trio. They've all got these fancy names. The owner of the fallen. There's my Pearl impression for you.
That was actually a pretty good one for that one, I got to say.
Why, thank you. What else did she say? Let's see. Axis of Ages. The Heretic's Anguish. I think that's all of them.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty badass name too, I got to say.
Yeah. I was like, who in gem history is a heretic? Right?
Also, who named these? Was that Rose? Did Rose name these? Has Rose got this weird punk goth side we yet to see?
Oh goodness, I would put money on Pearl being involved in some of these. She is the dramatic one, but we don't really know with Rose yet.
I just would have given them the same name Stephen did. Oh look, the metal ball dealies.
Yes. I noticed the giant penny did not return. Oh, yeah. Even with the seriousness of the episode, there was a lot of really funny stuff in it. It was a funny episode some of the time, like the thing with the giant axe and them they're in the background arguing about how to get it through the door. And if you listen, you can hear like, turn it clockwise. And
your other clockwise.
Yes, your other Yeah. Somehow Garnet cannot manipulate this axe through this tiny door.
Well, Amethyst might be backwards helping.
Mm-hmm. You mean pull? Yeah, pull. There was Stephen jumping out of the lion on his bike, and so just these visuals, him reaching into the lion's mane and pulling out a drink.
Yeah.
So many like weird little gags like that.
I think that was also good to add that lighter, sillier moment to calm us down as we went to the final bits.
Yeah. That was another funny thing I liked. I liked when when Pearl is saying like, "Oh, you look so much like her." And he's like, "Really?" And he's making this goofy face. And she was like,
only sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Little bit of animation on Lion when he's asleep, and his ears just twitch a bit, just like a regular dog or cat, and probably, for all I know, a real lion does.
Yes, they do really well with that stuff. Make it feel real.
Lion's sleeping also at that time had to me this real air of, my work today is done.
Yeah.
I've dragged the tiny round human across space and through portals and reconciled him with the tall pale one.
Yeah. I'm going to lick my feet and fall asleep right here, and maybe later I'll get a treat. Yeah, I thought it was cute when he got real excited about hearing about the armory until Pearl told him that there was like this massive hike and a climb, and so he just makes her carry him.
Yeah, that's how it's going to go. You knew that, Pearl.
Yeah, though, if you could just like shapeshift and turn into a dog copter the way that Amethyst does, you could just fly up there. So I don't know, why didn't they put the warp pad a little closer? Maybe just because they didn't want anybody to find it. So no lazy gems allowed in here. Can you imagine Rose doing that, climbing up? Maybe Pearl carried her. And she'd make the same face. I need to draw that now.
That'd be awesome.
Oh, I don't know if I actually will. My room's been needing another pile. I like that line too. So.
Follow-up questions!
I haven't asked you any probing questions yet, but I don't know if I can think of one. Should I just ask you to take a guess at something?
Go on.
All right. Like we already kind of talked about this, but in your opinion, do you feel like the relationship between Pearl and Rose was mutual or one-sided?
I think the intensity that Pearl manifests is one-sided. I don't think Rose completely disregarded her, but from what little I've seen, I don't think Rose felt the same way as much as deeply for Pearl. It's even possible that Rose had the same blinker on that so many viewers did and managed to convince herself that there was no romance going on there, maybe as a way to stop herself having to worry about it. Certainly we've seen that out of regular people, sort of closing one eye to things they'd rather not see. I mean, if Pearl was always acting like she is this week, then yes, Rose would have to be entirely insensible to not see it. But Pearl this week has had a decade or more of no Rose to really cycle her feelings up to let them out.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say she loved Pearl in some sense. I don't think it was romantic, or at least not as romantically, as intensely as Pearl loved her.
Hard to match that level of intensity for real.
And of course, with an absent Rose, she can't, whenever Pearl does this, she can't step up and say, well, actually, it's not like that, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it was more, I think from Rose's side, it was more than Rose's simple lovable things, but I don't think it was what Pearl felt for her.
Yeah, there seems to be at least Pearl's end some value in exclusivity because of just the way that she spent so much time trying to convince herself and everyone that their bond was above and beyond everybody else's, and she was Rose's sole confidant and, you know, such and such. But we know that Rose had a relationship with Greg as well, so it at least wasn't exclusive, and that it feels like that would bother Pearl. So.
Yeah, so we don't know if she managed to reshape that, retell that in her own mind.
Yeah, I imagine with Pearl's kind of disregard for humans, she probably just considered him a lower life form and figured, you know, he doesn't really count. But it's not even just romantic love that she seemed jealous about. Like, she didn't want anybody else to have pieces of Rose that she didn't also have.
She didn't want there to be those pieces of Rose she didn't also have.
Yeah. Seems kind of awkward that this was set off by Stephen knowing a bunch of stuff about her that she didn't know, specifically the lion stuff, but that even in kind of her angry freak out, she wasn't quite directing it at Stephen, like that he was somehow more special to Rose because she knows they've never met, but that's what she used to disregard it, to make it less special.
Well, that's what put him out of the running of being the special one, the simple fact that he wasn't there.
Right. And she was willing to, you know, share that place with him because it's technically his now. He has her gem. So
she may have seen that as her granting some of her parts of Rose to him.
Yeah. Right, that she's like sort of the steward of it.
And she was already a bit iffy about Lion in the first place, and now to find out she represents the thing she feared most, which is Rose having a life outside of her that she doesn't even know about.
Yeah.
So she doesn't mind Stephen knowing per se, it's that the information was around for Stephen to know and had been conveyed to him by some method that wasn't Pearl.
Right, she wanted that experience of giving it to him and being the one to show him, to invite him into this club. And meanwhile, we have known about it since episode 17.
Yeah.
So nice little callback there that they introduced Rose's armory that early. And Connie's seen it too.
Yeah.
So
Don't tell Pearl that. She might not be ready for that bit.
Yeah, don't tell Pearl. Connie's seen it too. Yeah, we hung out here. We did some training here. We beat up a robot shooty thing.
Then we went to the movies. No big.
Yeah, I totally saw Dogcopter. I have no idea how many times I've seen this episode, but I almost always cry.
Yeah, I could see you welling up with the bits of my eyes that went on the screen.
You did. I was trying to not actually cry, so I cry pretty easily, though. I mean, especially that last minute or so where there's no dialogue. It's just poignant piano music, and he's doing that little show for her, and pulls out a meaningful object, and I don't know, it's so atmospheric and sad. I don't know, it just does something. And Pearl is not the character that I relate to the most at all, so I definitely feel like she's just I don't know, she's not somebody that I personally relate to, but at the same time I hate seeing her in pain because she just has it right on the outside of everything about her. She's telegraphing this pain that she's in.
Well, even if we don't relate directly to her, she's the sort of person we've all met or known.
Sure. Yeah. I think I've mentioned it before, but the main thing I relate to with her is that I also like to organize and clean stuff. So,
we've all known someone or been someone that you have to be careful just not to take that far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And not razz them about their dead would-be lover who turned into their son.
Yeah, I feel like her hot button issues would be pretty known at this point, and they would mostly try to stay away from them so that they don't set her off. But you don't really get a feeling that the people who know her well are always walking on eggshells around her. But like, they also kind of expect this to happen sometimes, and they're just used to her doing that. It doesn't make it easier. It's just they're familiar with it.
Yeah. Also, Stephen is this is the first time running across something the other characters already know character.
Mm-hmm.
So it is plausible he's not run smack head first into this aspect of Pearl before, especially because up until now he's starting to gain it a bit, but by his own words, he doesn't ask follow-up questions and often just doesn't dig deep on something.
Right. Yeah. Like I mentioned earlier, this like tonally reminds me of Space Race, and that one was not related in any obvious way to Rose. So I'm sure that, that it did feel like kind of a first time for him seeing her reaction like that. That he just like straight up asks her in this episode, what was mom like? And it's like, you never asked anybody to tell you about your mom, like, or at least not. So, but in Space Race, he was kind of like, he was just focused on trying to calm Pearl down and get her to stop doing dangerous stuff to get into space when it wouldn't work. And
and in Space Race, she wasn't nearly so angry as she was here.
No, just desperate, just blinded by the possibility that they could get into space and see what's been going on.
And maybe earlier Stephen just asked, like, Garnet, what was mom like? She was tall.
For Garnet to say that, that's a thing. Probably would have been nice for Garnet to have another tall gem around. Yeah, it was based on the comparison between Rose and Greg. It seems like Rose was probably bigger.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, just based on the relative sizes we've seen, but knowing they're not absolute, but
right.
It has seemed to me that at least the intent has been that Rose is that bit taller.
Yeah, she's very big, just larger than life. Must have been sort of imposing to be around somebody that big, because on top of how big she is, like her hair is this giant pink cloud. She's just so much.
Well, unlike Garnet, she's sort of scaled up all around, is Rose.
Yeah.
She's also wider and just generally bigger, not just taller.
Yeah, she's very substantial.
Slightly obfuscated by her meringue dress too.
Yeah, it'd be a big surprise if she had tiny stick legs under there.
Well, her legs only come halfway down. She's got huge platforms.
Oh my goodness. Stop giving me ideas of stuff to draw. That'd be funny. Oh, well, what else can we talk about? I know that we didn't talk about any of the factoids yet, but I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to talk about in the episode. Anything for you?
I mean, we didn't get a song. I don't think we got any food.
There was no food.
Oh, there was the drink, that's all.
Oh, like just Steven drinking one of those plain old canned sodas?
Yeah, which we've seen him do before, so.
Right. The strawberries were there, but I've already made strawberry cake. Yeah. So yeah, I didn't do food for this episode, sadly. Background music was mostly stuff that they've used before, like the Strawberry Battlefield music was used before. And what else?
That could be good to rebuild a mood.
Yeah, the environments have their own sort of elevator music, I guess. But the Armory had its own tune, and that was back. But they did kind of reinvent the Strawberry Battlefield music for when it was nighttime, when they were there at night with Pearl hugging Rose's sword and stuff. That whole scene had something called Moonlit Battlefield. And of course, the beautiful piano that was at the end.
I'm always in love with the piano moves on this show.
Yeah, and they're generally associated with Pearl. That one was called I'm Still Here, which is just, ow. You know?
Yeah, and even the title of the really background track is wounding you. You know they're doing something right.
Her talking about now she's gone, but I'm still here. And what would she say if she could see me now? Oh, my God. Oh, the things that she must be thinking about. Just so honest and sad.
If only I had known that.
So we went over the storyboarders, and Rebecca joined them this time. Let's see. Oh, right. I have to open my thing here to find the description of this one, which was Stephen joins Pearl on a special mission to a place that belonged to Rose Quartz. Wasn't really a mission, was it?
I started to think that the people who write the summaries think everything is a mission.
It's like, this is one of the buzzwords for the show. I don't remember where I heard this exactly. I think Rebecca Sugar has said this a couple of times, but the end scene where like Stephen is hugging her and then doing funny things to kind of cheer her up and stuff. She's talked about how this was very much like her brother, Stephen, that if she had a bad day or something, he would know that something happened, and he would spend time with her and play video games and do, just trying to do things that it wasn't because he wanted to do it. It was because he thought she would want to do it, and that she knew what he was doing. And it was just a very loving gesture that she remembered him doing frequently.
I wondered if something like that might be the case, if this was a drawn from real life, drawn from real Stephen moment.
Yeah. So apparently she was the Pearl in that situation, that he would just be there for someone who was suffering, it's very sweet. Another Rebecca story that I heard, this was some kind of online interaction. I think it happened in the comments of Instagram or something. And she was asked, or had a fan reference that end scene where Pearl is clearly telling war stories, but the music is playing, so you don't know what she said. And I think somebody said that they wish they knew what she was saying. And Rebecca said that she actually had an answer for that. Pearl was saying, and out of nowhere, when it seemed impossible, Rose charged in with me by her side. So, and Stephen's just sitting there listening to these war stories, amazing stories about his mom and Pearl. Yeah. What else? I told you what the original title was. One thing I wanted to tell you was that this episode was the first episode of the very first Stephen Bomb event. They called them Stephen Bombs. And as they were approaching the finale of season 1, I guess the network asked them to make something that was enough like an arc that they could do a special on it, show one every weekday until the finale on Friday. And so they were like, okay, let's scrape together some episodes to make this feel like it's building to something a little faster. So this episode started it off on the Monday of the Stephen Bomb event, the very first one. And then they ended up having to cut some other episodes that were less important to the storyline so that they could get a lot of attention for some of the most high action plotty episodes that build to the end of the season. So you've seen your first episode of a Stephen Bomb. Yeah, which of course is a reference to Garnet's universe. Stephen Bomb! And he lands on her hair.
I thought that sounds familiar.
Yeah, I think they probably used that in the advertising. I would be very surprised if they didn't, but at the time that they were advertising this, I had not yet joined the fandom, so I was not around. So I got sucked in by the hype that happened after the end of season 1, which is coming up for us.
And now I know what a Stephen Bomb is.
Stephen Bomb! Let's see.
Brand spanking new, mint in box.
I think all I have left is merch.
Let's merch.
Okay. This has a bit of a story to it. So what I have right here is a replica of Rose's flag.
Oh!
It's huge.
It is.
Whoa, knocking things down. It's on a flagpole because I'm a nerd.
Well, and because it's a flag.
That's why you put me over. What's that?
And because it's a flag, let's be fair.
And it's a flag, yes. So this is Rose's battle flag here. It's not torn up like the one in Rose's Scabbard episode, but this is, they sold it on Cartoon Network's website, but they also sent a free one to everybody who pre-ordered the vinyl music set. And this was not like announced or anything. They just started showing up in the mail. And people were like, I just got a Rose Quartz flag randomly. And,
Cool.
and I was like, why didn't I get one? And I was just, all these people keep getting it. And I was disappointed because I was like, how come I didn't get a free one? And it turned out that I did get a free one, but it was delayed astronomically because I had moved since pre-ordering the vinyl records. And so it took a while to get forwarded to me. So by that point I had already bought one. So I have two. And I mounted one of mine on a flagpole, and it lives in my living room. It has like a wall mount and everything. So there's this Rose Quartz flag in my living room because I'm an adult. And it came in this beautiful envelope, which I can show you.
Oh, that is nice.
Came in like a envelope with a personalized letter. Well, not personalized, but it's got this cute letter. Should be in here still. I know I got one. Here it is. So it has a letter on like stationery with Rose Quartz's gem and everything.
Oh.
Dear human being, we are the Crystal Gems, and we fly this flag in defense of your kind. There were gems that wanted to harm your world. We are not those gems. We have defeated those gems. We will continue to fight for what we believe in, no matter the cost. We believe in the incredible power of humans, the power to change and grow and love. We will never stop fighting for that love, and we will always protect you. Rose Quartz.
Followed by a GoFundMe link.
Yeah, right. And it closes with a Crystal Gems manifesto, which says, fight for life on the planet Earth. Defend all human beings, even the ones you don't understand. Believe in love that is out of anyone's control, and then risk everything for it. So that's their manifesto. And these just showed up in the mail for some people.
Cool.
That's fun. It's a nice grade of material. I don't know how you say that. But
It looked pretty good in the video.
Yeah, so I'll have to show a visual of that to our YouTube people. That's my merch. Hooray! And I'm done.
Yep.
Anything else before we move on to the next episode, which is called Open Book?
No, I think we've run ramrod through poor Pearl's psyche for now.
Oh my goodness. Well, I can promise you that is not the last of that, but...
Maybe the Open Book is a self-help book.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. All right. Well, let's see what's next, right? Thanks for listening, everyone.
Till next time.
Bye. You've been listening to Ivy and Daria on Not So Giant Women.
You can find episodes of the show in video form by looking up Not So Giant Women on YouTube.
Or in audio form at anchor.fm/NotSoGiantWomen or your podcatcher of choice. You can also find us on Facebook.
Audio production by Daria.
Video production and music by Ivy.
Daria can also be heard on Podsploitation, the Ozploitation podcast.
And Ivy at her Steven Universe fan blog at love-takes-work.tumblr.com.
Steven Universe was created by Rebecca Sugar and remains property of Cartoon Network.
No infringement is intended.